What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the EPM show. This is all things enterprise performance management, and we're here to give you an unfair career advantage. Today, we welcomed Sukumar Ramanathan to the podcast. Suku has over 20 years of experience in technology sales. He's currently the RVP of Sales at Anaplan. He and his team specifically support the world's leading technology, media, and telecom companies from an Anaplan perspective. And he shared some incredible career insights today. We talked a lot about the importance of repetition. Repetition is key when you are building mastery and long-term career success. We talked about how great leaders are great listeners. And when in doubt, one of the best questions you can ask someone is, tell me more. And then we also talked about how important it is to find a mentor in your career, somebody that you want to emulate that can be a huge career accelerator. And then lastly, how to build great relationships and trust with your stakeholders, whether you're in sales, whether you're in consulting, whether you're in a technical role, all of these kind of soft skills, influencing skills, leadership skills that we talked about today have a huge impact and can have a huge impact on your career. So I hope you find these insights valuable. Check it out. Dude, how you doing?
Thanks. How about yourself, Chad?
Fantastic. Fantastic. I'm so pumped to have you on the show. This has been a one that I have been looking forward to for a while now, just given our relationship and your time at Anaplan. So, Tuka, we can jump right in. If you wouldn't mind, give the audience kind of your career flyover in 60 seconds.
Absolutely. So I started out my career first with a degree in engineering, of a mechanical engineering by training. And I did that in India. And like a lot of Indians at that stage of my life, I came to the United States for graduate school. So I came to North Carolina, which I can see from your background, Dad, you have a common background in. I was, of course, in Carolina, but with the other school, not the NC State, but the UNC. And I got a degree. I got a degree in computer science. And upon graduation, I worked for the first 5 years of my career actually writing software. I wrote compilers and code, and I taught Unix and things like that. But my nature is more outgoing, and I didn't want to be stuck in a back room, basically in front of a computer with storage units whirring behind me. So I asked for a switch to sales. And the regional manager at that time in my company gave me a shot. He gave me a bridge job in the middle, which was as a sales engineer. And I went on the road covering accounts in upstate New York at Sun Microsystems for 5 years, including being on the East Coast headquarters in my first job as an account manager. Came out to the West Coast at that time to their headquarters in Palo Alto. And then since then, it's been a successive series of jobs at various companies, Salesforce among them. I also worked at LinkedIn in enterprise sales, switched from LinkedIn to Amazon Web Services, where I was on their cloud team for 6 years, eventually leading the high-tech sales segment. And then from there, I went to Stripe, which was a different beast because it was in fintech. And most recently, at my current job at Anaplan, which is where you and I crossed paths.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Before we jump into the kind of main part of the show, I have one more just fun get to know you question for the audience. And so as you and I were getting to know each other, you were coming back from an amazing time in Australia. Tell me a little bit about your favorite part of that trip, what Australia was like, and what you learned about that time that you were over there.
Absolutely. So my wife is a doctor and she's an academic. She works as a professor, and she was lucky enough to win a Fulbright fellowship, which is kind of a mid-career fellowship offered to people that are great in their fields. And it was done in collaboration with the consortium of Australian national universities. So she came one day, when I was home, and she just said, "Hey, I won this thing. It's a huge honor. It's going to be for a good chunk of time. Do you think that you and the family would be interested in joining?" And we were all at transition stages at the time as a family. My oldest was just finishing school. She just finished her bachelor's. The middle one was finishing high school, and the little guy was in middle school. So for me, it was just a question of how quickly can I embrace this new kind of curveball that came into our lives. She was the working spouse. I went there as a trailing spouse, and I wasn't working during the time we were there. So we lived in Australia for 6 months. And her job was going from university to university, threading her field. Her field is pharmacogenomics. So she was going from Sydney to Melbourne, Melbourne to Adelaide, Adelaide to Perth, and so on, visiting with the medical schools and the heads of departments of those universities, doing seminars and teaching the teachers, as it were. And my job, which I did really well, was to basically take my son and drive around the whole continent for those 6 months. It was kind of the longest road trip I've ever done in my life. And it was at the end of it, over the 6 months, he and I drove 12,000 miles. Australia is a massive country. It's the size of the United States. So think of driving from Miami to San Diego, up to Seattle, going over to Boston, and then coming back to Miami. That was the distance. And in between, of course, we visited every state. We visited every capital, including the little island of Tasmania that was off the coast of Australia. And we visited every national park. And it was one of the happiest periods of my life because got to see the Southern Cross. You got to see kangaroos hop across the road. Australia has a lot of people that live along the coastline, but the middle of the country is just a vast heap of not very much. It's just like population of Western Australia, for instance, is 2 million, but it is on its own, it would be the ninth largest country on earth. So you do a lot of driving, hundreds and hundreds of miles where you don't see a single human being. We went to a couple of national parks. One of them was the size of Yosemite. And the entire day we were there, we saw 4 people. So it's just kind of the vast beyond, but beautiful, beautiful country. And I was just reveling in it. One day you'd be with dolphins in the ocean. Another day you'd be in a mountain top. Third day driving through desert for the whole day. If you ever look for a place to just kind of sink into a gorgeous country, I could not recommend anything more than that continent. It's like how the US must have been 150 years ago.
Mhm. That's really cool. I know you know this about me. I'm a scuba diver because we had connects when I was in Bonaire doing a dive trip. So we share that. I know you were a diver as well. Did you ever were you able to blow any bubbles while you were over there, get in the water?
Everyone knows the Great Barrier Reef. It's
Right.
thousands of miles long and you have some of the best diving in the world. But what people don't know is on western coast of Australia, way up on the north, there's these places, towns called Broome and Exmouth, which is the second largest barrier reef in that part of the world. And not many people go there because even in Australia, people have lived there their whole lives and they don't. It's forbidding to get there. My son and I had to drive almost 1,000 miles from Perth to get to the reef there, the reef area. But once you're in that part of the country, which is very sparsely populated, Chad, you literally can step off the beach and you can be diving and you can have manta rays like swimming around you. And it's so sparsely populated that there may be only 3 or 4 people on your dive boat and you're all day in this paradise, just like translucent blue water, marine life all around you, untouched reefs. It's some of the best diving in the world. And we absolutely had a wonderful time there. It's an odd name, it's called the Ningaloo, but my goodness, is it gorgeous.
That is so cool. I mean, you are in like untouched
Yeah.
nature, untouched water. I mean, it's unpolluted. That is so cool. I would love to get out there and do that. Worth the trip, I'm sure.
Yeah, the drive, boy, it was 5 days of driving, getting there. And we'd go to this place where in the distance, they'd say there's a town that's, 100 miles away. And you were looking forward to people and an inn or, some place to sit down and eat a drink and that kind of stuff. And it'd be population 5. And you'd
Mm.
go in there and the entire town was basically one roadhouse. And in the roadhouse, the 3 people out of the 5 worked in the bar. So it was like, out of Crocodile Dundee, except it was real. And you couldn't believe it happened in this day and age, but it would. And it's very, very stark. I don't know if you ever saw it. This was a movie from back in the day called Mad Max, which was just like this very tribal, stark, wilderness, crazy adventure story. And then I learned that Mad Max, they didn't have to create Mad Max in a Hollywood set. They literally just had the director drive out in that part of the world and have his camera hanging out the side of his car for the crazy starkness that you saw, all the Mad Max movies.
I didn't know that. That's crazy. Well, we can talk about that all day. We can talk about adventures all day. But let's transition here to career growth. Obviously, the EPM show is focused on helping EPM professionals grow their career. You've spent your whole career in technology in a variety of roles, mostly on the sales go-to-market side. as you kind of shared. So, and now you've made the pivot into EPM. Talk to me a little bit just from your experience. How would you encourage early career, even mid-career professionals to think about the jobs that they take today? Like when they career path, what would you encourage them to think about?
If I had to summarize it into one phrase, I would say take a lot of at bats, because at the early part of your life, especially when you're just out of school and in your early 20s and you're considering a career in sales, I think taking a lot of practice is really helpful because it's not a profession that is something you can read in a book. It's a profession that you actually have to experientially understand how it works. So my first job in sales, I was actually, like, I think you and I talked about this. I was an engineer, and I used to get really salty when I saw the salespeople on the other half of the office having a grand old time and thinking, all those folks do is drink and take people out to lunch. And, why do they get paid as much as they do? And so when I went to my regional manager and I said, I'd like to switch out of engineering and become a salesperson, he laughed because he said it's a completely different skill set. It's like I had the science, but I didn't understand the art of selling. And so he wouldn't let me actually go carry a bag and immediately become a salesperson. He said, you need to actually live the life. And so there was a guy that was very outgoing, very classic salesperson, a guy named Ron Rakowski. And he said, I'm going to have you apprentice with Ron and you're going to cover the territory that Ron does, except you'll be the sales engineer. And when you go on a sales call, if the conversation gets very technical, you know, Ron can lob the ball to you and say, my colleague here will be able to give you the technical details because I was an engineer. And so we had a patch that was in upstate New York, and it started out on the very east part in Schenectady, New York, and followed the New York Turnpike all the way to the western part, which was Buffalo. That's about, 600 miles. You had a lot of accounts starting with GE, and then you went to the Rome Air Force Base, you had Syracuse University, you had Carrier Corp, you had Kodak, Xerox, State University of New York and Buffalo, Cornell University. And so we used to basically do like a Monday through Thursday kind of, visits with these companies. And so I was kind of the person that didn't talk a lot at that time because I was not the salesperson, he used to kind of lead. And during the first few weeks of doing that, I learned how much deeper it is. It's not just, a smile and a shoe shine and just being able to talk somebody's ear off. You really got to be able to understand the customer's world. And nothing teaches you the customer's world is actually being at their site and watching and listening and talking about their particular issues. So that, I think, is really important to kind of go in early and to be humble when you start, like, not expect that you're going to have the answers to everything. The second thing, which was a revelation to me, still is I used to think that salespeople used to be glib talkers. You could just kind of talk the sheet metal off a car kind of thing. You'd be a great salesperson. And what I learned instead that was the best are actually great listeners. The most important phrase I learned in sales was tell me more. Because a customer will often tell you exactly what their world is. But if you think that you need to be a smooth talker and kind of talk over them and talk 90% of the time, you're not getting the real information that's going on. And when you spend most of your time listening, I think then you are much better equipped to take whatever product or processes or services your company offers and aligning it to whatever the customer's needs are in a way that is actually helpful to them. And it's not the best salespeople I've ever known are not people that do a one-time deal and then leave. The people that have the first interaction and then the value that they provide so constant for so long that they actually go over to the same side of the table as the other person. It's not, let me just jam this product down your throat and then go away because I've got my commission. It really is, I'm going to help advocate for you. I'm going to wear your t-shirt, Mr. or Miss Customer, to my company. I'm going to be your mouthpiece to my own company that sells you things because I'm going to be so valuable that I'm the first phone call you make.
There's a lot of gold in there. I think whether you're in sales or whether you're not in sales, a couple of things that I heard were at bats are key. One thing that I used to always hear is repetition leads to mastery because you just become more intuitive and you're able to anticipate instead of reacting, the more you find yourself in a situation, kind of like you talked about. It's the art of sales. We interview a lot of consultants. I think it's the same way for consulting and for implementation of EPM tools like Anaplan, right? You have to be able to sit in the customer's world and fully understand. A lot of the best consultants that we interview talk about the importance of discovery and spending more and more time on discovery because it leads to a better output. So I love that. At bats are key. And then the other thing was, like you kind of said, you had a great mentor and you started from a place of humility instead of going right into sales. You had that sales engineer role. You got to observe, you got to listen and watch and see the nuance that happens at a really high level. And then obviously listening well, asking great questions. I think those things go so far in any career because that's how you partner well with people. And then the other thing that I love that is actually kind of my favorite, what you ended with, is like just building real relationships. Like the more you are others focused and say, how can I advocate for you? It's not just about my commission. It's that abundance mentality of I'm going to make sure everyone around me is successful. Everyone around me is getting what it is that they need out of our product or solution. It's only going to lead to good things. Yeah.
The best training programs that I've ever been part of. So I used to work for Salesforce for a while there. And so they have a very well graded training program that starts from you're 23 years old, fresh out of school, you're getting into sales. They put you in a job that's called SR, sales rep. And all you're doing is handling inbounds. So basically, if somebody has come onto the Salesforce website and they call the 1-800 number, it's 2 licenses, a mom and pop shop, whatever, it's given to the SR to close. And for the first year, you're basically just sitting there learning the block and tackle, the process. And then if you're in the top third of your class, you move on to the next role, the BDR. And it's so finely grained that over the course of 7 or 8 years, you go from handling only inbounds where everything is very tightly constrained to eventually being able to call on the largest companies in the world. But it is a process. It's like being an athlete. It's like being a teacher. It's your point is well taken, which is if you go in there going, I'm not going to go and knock it out of the park and be a bazillionaire at age 23, but it is science that I learn. It is the process. And then eventually I'm going to add my own personality and art to it, and having the patience for it. You can have a wonderful career. But if you try and just boil the ocean with everything at one point, I think that's where people stop.
I love that you highlight that it's a process and it takes time. It takes 5, 7, 8, 10 years. It takes a decade to become an expert in anything. A decade of singular focus on like one particular craft. So how would and one of the things I think about is like, especially younger people, early 20s, mid 20s, you grow up in a social media, instant gratification world. It can be really hard to be patient. So what would like how would you encourage someone who's maybe you've identified that attitude in a younger professional or individual who's just, they're
Yeah.
ambitious and the energy is good, but they're
Yeah.
impatient to the point where it's not helpful for them or for anybody else. And you don't want to
Yeah.
just, hey, sit down and learn. You need to do this for 3 years, actually not 6 months before you really understand it. How would you coach that?
So I think that 2 or 3 things. One is if you can find somebody in your office or in your team or in your group that you think is somebody you want to emulate. They seem to have an air about them that's confident. It's not necessarily effortless. You can see the energy and effort that goes into it. And ask if you can apprentice with them. I mean, I don't think there is actually a phrase. You can't just say, I want to be your apprentice, but just say, hey, I'm kind of starting out here. I want to do well. I see how you're doing. And I think that, you're a great role model for me. Can I trail you? Can you have me attached and added to your meetings, for instance, and introduce me as a company employee who's just new and is just going to be listening in because they're starting out? Most customers will not have a problem with that. And then just be a lot of note taking and a fly on the wall. And then afterwards, if they're kind enough to allow you to debrief with them, why did you say this? What did you mean by that? That kind of stuff. I talked about Ron at Sun Micro. I was very lucky to be able to kind of ride shotgun with him on those road trips. There was another guy that when I joined Salesforce, I didn't know very much about CRM when I joined Salesforce, who was somebody that I thought did the job marvelously. Guy named Scott Blocker. And he's been with the company now for 25 years. His only job, I think, he started out of UCLA at Salesforce, and now He's still there. He's an SVP now. He started out as a rookie sales guy. But I went on a sales call with him to VMware, which was one of our customers. And before the meeting, he and I had a briefing, which is just like, here's the information that procurement person we need to get before we put a proposal together. And I went to the call with him together. I was new, been there for a few months. He was the guy that was basically the coach. And we went and met with the procurement person. I got introduced as the new guy. And she talked to her for half an hour. And during the course of the half an hour, he didn't say any single thing at all that was formal. It wasn't a sit down meeting. Hey, let me ask you this question, that question. They just kind of shot the shit about sports, about the Niners, about life, about how our kids were doing. And then in the middle, both the things we wanted to get, he just slid that in as very kind of casual questions. And it was so artless that unless I knew that we had talked about it, I wouldn't even have known that the question was being asked. But because we had prepped in the car before we went in, he just talked about it. And then she gave the answers because it was just a very casual reply. And the meeting was almost like a, hey, bud, how's it going? Meeting someone in a bar kind of thing. But we came out with the precise pieces of information that we had. And it taught me so much. He had such a good relationship with her that it was almost like they were meeting at a farmer's market over the weekend or something like that. But it also had a purpose. It also accomplished what we wanted to do. And I learned that you don't go in kind of like all formal and clearing your throat and sitting down with someone kind of, I'm going to quiz you on this and you're going to give me this answer. And it's going to be like the bookie. It really is an informal, practiced, friendly relationship. The best customer salesperson relationships are that way. So I would never have known that if I hadn't actually apprenticed under him in a way in my early days at Salesforce. So that's my biggest piece of advice I can give. Be in the company for 2 or 3 months, look around to who you think is doing well, ask around who are the best salespeople, why are they considered that? And most 99 out of 100 would not mind you joining them. They will actually be very flattered if you just said, I'm new here, trying to learn my way around. So many people have told me that they're great at what you do. Can I hang with you when you go do a couple of your sales calls? And if you'd be kind enough to do a debrief afterwards about why you did what you did, that's gold.
That's so good. So you talk about relationships and Scott had developed a relationship with this procurement person to the point where it just felt so natural. So just like you said, kind of like almost we're meeting up at a bar after work and just gonna talk life and all that kind of stuff. So what are maybe some other keys that you've seen help you be successful when it comes to like real relationship development so you can get to that type of a relationship? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm going to go back to a book that was very formative, very early in my life. And it's a corny title. It's called The 7 Habits of Successful People. I don't know if you've ever come across it, but I'd highly recommend it.
Even Kevy?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So,
Good one. Yeah.
it's like saying Dale Carnegie, how to make friends influence people. People are just like, oh my God, this is so cornball. But my God, the advice in there, it's timeless. It's lasted 100 years, And one of Covey's things that was absolutely on point was do what you say you're going to do. If you ask me what's the absolutely topmost thing you can do for earning trust with anyone, with a customer, with your team, with your spouse, with your kids, it's like if my dad or the salesperson or whoever says, okay, I'll get it to you by Friday, you get it to them by Friday, come hell or high water. And if you do that, repeatedly, excellence is basically repeatedly doing something that you say you're going to do and making sure that your word is your bond. I think that goes a long way towards building the foundations of a strong relationship. Do it 10 times with somebody, cannot help but become kind of friendly with. You're reliable, you're somebody that they can trust, and trust is earned by action. I really believe that. And it's hard to do. And especially if you have the habit, which I did early in my career, of just not thinking ahead and just, saying you do something without even having enough time or the knowledge to do it, and then kind of flailing and missing and having to make excuses, everything goes sideways. What I learned after taking that course, I actually took a 3-day course, was be thoughtful, be measured, and be reliable. And if you do that, it's inevitable that it will happen.
Simple, but so difficult to do at a high level for years, right? It
Yes.
requires that consistency. And I think that's really good counsel for anyone, myself included, in the first 10 years of your career is be measured and be thoughtful. Let your yes be yes and your no be no is another thing that I've heard. And so,
Yeah.
what gets you in trouble is not saying no, it's saying yes and not being able to deliver. So
You know,
you have to be
that's
thoughtful about your capacity.
one of the most gratifying meetings of my life was later in my career. This was when I was at AWS, when I had met with the customer, large customer, West Coast. And I told them, this will be on its way to you. And I said, I will send the contract over tomorrow. And he said, I don't need a contract. You've told me. That to me was just like, oh my God, I finally reached the stage, which was this aspirational stage of what I wanted to be when I was, 25. Took me
Mm,
till 40 to get there, but I
mm,
had built up this reliability reputation with the
mm.
customer. And it was a milestone for it, but it took 15 years,
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, it took 15 years to get to that point where
build that
someone
reputation. Yeah.
trusted your word that much to say, no, I don't need a
Well,
contract. You told me that you would do it.
a side benefit is, and this is in our profession in sales, like I had Intuit as a customer when I was at Salesforce, and it was a year and a half pursuit. They were buying Service Cloud. And during that time, I built a warm relationship with the purchasing guy, that named Johan Johansson. And at the end of it, we finally got to the finish line, December contract, got it closed, hurrah. And the last call with him, I just told him how much I had enjoyed working with him. He said, let me know if you ever go anywhere, in the future, meaning I'm leaving Salesforce because Intuit would be interested in talking to you. So that reliability, it was with the person, but
Yeah.
it didn't matter to him if I represented someone else. If I had gone
Right.
from Salesforce to ServiceNow or something, he would still just say, whatever it is you're representing, I'll give you an audience and I'll get you in front of power.
Mm.
So
That's I think that's so critical in B2B sales is that having a deep relationship with individuals and as they go places and you go places, your network expands and it's this positive compounding effect of reputation and relationship if you continue to be reliable and do what you say you're going to do and deliver.
and you think of a salesperson relationship with procurement to be adversarial. It's like, I'm going to sell you something and that person's like, I don't want to buy it or I want to get it as cheap as possible, that kind of stuff. But the absolute best salespeople I know, it really is the amount of trust and confidence that you build with whoever it is on the other side. Procurement, the head of revenue, the CFO, the CIO. It's like, Jenna is reliable. Whatever she says, I will give her an audience because she's built up the trust with me over the course of 5, 7, 9 years of working together. Maybe not always with the same company. Maybe she's worked across 2 companies or 3, but she's always welcome here. But it's work. It really is work. It's like, if you look at professional sports, right? No one goes full fledged into like stardom in the NFL. They pay the dues, they're kind of like riding the bench. They're showing up at practice. It may be 4, 5, 6 years before they kind of make the all-star game. During the time, they're doing the reps.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing on that too that I'll add is people only see when you make the all-star team.
Yes.
They only see you had the big sale, you get, President's Club or whatever. Like they see those things and they go, man, like I want to be where they are. You know what I mean? But they don't see the 5 years that it took. They don't see that into it was a year and a half. It was a year and a half
Yes.
of work, relationship building, soft touch here, soft touch there, value add here, value add there, getting to know people. Like they just say, oh wow, like what an amazing sale. How'd you do that? Well, I worked
Yeah.
for a year and a half and I built 10 years of sales skills on top of
Yeah.
that
Yes.
before. So yeah, it's easy to get caught up in seeing the end result and assuming like, oh, I want to get there too, and not fully understanding the body of work that goes into it.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Hey, this has been amazing. I've got one more kind of EPM question for you. Just you've been in the EPM space, obviously tech your whole career, platform companies your whole career, but EPM specifically, what are you about 9 months now?
It is my 8th month at
Oh,
Anaplan, really
okay.
enjoying it.
Eight
Yeah.
months at Anaplan so far. So just tell me a little bit about just kind of your assessment of EPM as a whole now that you're in it.
So I was a customer of EPM before I was a salesperson of EPM. And that was when I was a sales leader at Amazon Web Services. And we had used Excel as where we put in our sales forecast. And then all of a sudden, one fine January, we got told we got to be using Anaplan. And there was consternation, which is just like, why mess with something that's working already? Why this big change and that kind of stuff? And I was one of the skeptics. I pushed back a lot about why are we adding some random new system when what we've got is just something that everyone understands. Excel is like one of the most universally used applications in the world. And then during that year, as I was working and applying all my knowledge about forecasting and entering it into Anaplan, I started seeing what the value truly was. Prior to that, if I was having a grand year and that Amazon Web Services for that time, 2016 to 2020, every year was a grand year, you knew that you needed to have more heads to, to get more revenue from a company that was just going gangbusters. But the process of saying, hey, I brought in 15 million from this account. I think there's more open space. I will need two more AEs that I can bring more revenue in for AWS, put that feedback into finance. Finance had to gather all the feedback from everybody. It would take 3 or 4 weeks before they had a sense of how different accounts were doing. Then you had to feed that into HR. Then HR had to open a rec. Start to finish, the whole cycle could be 12 weeks between when you knew there was white space and if you had talent, you could really get revenue to when you finally got a rec open to be able to interview someone.
That's a quarter just to get the rec open and then probably another quarter to get someone up
And
and
another
running.
quarter to train someone. Exactly. And then Anaplan comes in and everyone's working off of a common set of data. It's basically a single framework that works across finance and across sales and eventually HR. So I put my forecast in and it immediately shows up in finance as green. Hey, this person has HP as an account. HP was supposed to do 40 million. It's already done 44. We're only 6 months into the year. And then when I put my request in, I think we can add another couple of salespeople on this account in SDR because there's so much open space. The finance people just had to do one button click of saying, this isn't bullshit. This guy's like for real. There is real number coming in. And then it goes immediately and there's a pre-formatted creation of a rec in HR. Take it down from 12 weeks down to 2. And suddenly the company has, 10 weeks extra of selling time, which if you translate it in that world of multi-millions in B2B is massive in terms of ARR and overall growth in the company. So that to me, I became a believer, this application and EPM in general, the whole planning concept using applications which has common data frameworks across sales, across finance, across
Mhm.
HR. I didn't even know about supply chain at the time because I think it was early days. But imagine if you were a manufacturing company and you
Yep.
knew that you had to get more widgets and you were able to signal to the factory wherever it was, to crank out more because you were selling a lot more on the sales side. Compression and quicker decision making is huge. And so I think when current companies think Excel's fine, they don't really understand having a common set of data that people can act on with very, very quick turnaround time, how valuable, how
Mhm.
absolutely valuable that is. Second misconception, I'll make this quick, is I think that in the early days of EPM, people thought this is like implementing SAP. It takes you 48 months, 36 months before you're able to get everything all aligned to be operating inside this new environment. And one of the things that really impressed me at our AKO this year was that Anaplan has come up with apps. So basically, we've looked at what are the most common use cases across our largest customers. And we found that there's 80% commonality among the best of breed. And so we allow you now, rather than have to create and use an implementation partner and take 24 months in order to implement something that's a big transformational change, you can put an app up and you can just configure the app because all of it is pre-built templates. And you can get this stood up in a matter of months rather than even a year. And so the time to change is a lot quicker. And a lot of the stuff that you want to do, but you have to push out till 20, you could do that by the beginning of your next quarter. And so I'm really eager to see our go-to-market with that, because I think we have a problem statement by a lot of our customers about, we'd love to do this, we want to do a transformation, but we're looking at an 18-month window, and we're going to come back and say, how about 3 months?
That is value right there. That's incredible. So last question for you as we get you out of here. So incredible tech sales career y'all are running at Anaplan, a lot of excitement there. What is kind of your next big, hairy, audacious goal that you have your sights set on? It doesn't have to be professional. It can be personal, but just, what's giving you energy right now that you're running after?
So this is a medium-term goal. It is an audacious goal, but it's not right away. I'm in the middle of my time at Anaplan, and I'm planning on staying and doing a great job here as long as I can. But I've always liked the outdoors. I've always liked hiking. I've always liked long walks. I do a walk every day for an hour, and I've done that without fail for 11 years now. Every single day, it's an hour walk. But I want to do something where you stitch it from top to bottom over the course of many months. So obviously this will be at some future stage in my life, but there's something called the Greenway, Chad, which is on the East Coast where you are. And it is a trail that starts in Key West and it ends in Canada. So it's a long walk.
It's a long walk.
It's a long walk. And I'm planning on doing the Greenway, before my body gives out or anything. And this will be some years from now. But there's a little plaque in the very southernmost part of Key West. It's the southernmost part of the United States. I want to touch that and then start the walk, pack, tent. And then it may take 3 months. I think it's like over 2,000 miles. Most of it is now away from the road, so you don't have trucks going by and stuff like that.
That's good.
It's actually stitching together over 200 different trails that exist on the East Coast. The Biden administration has put a ton of money into connecting all those trails in a safe manner. And my goal is to get from the southernmost tip of our country all the way up to Calais and Maine, which is the border with Canada. So watch the space maybe some years from now.
Wow. That is a great BHAG. I love that. Well, Suku, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your career insights. If people want to reach out to you to ask more questions or follow up, where would be the best place for them to reach you?
So I've got a LinkedIn profile against my name, Sukumar, Sukumar, and Ramanathan, Ramanathan. I'm very open to any messaging on LinkedIn. And if people have a deeper question and they're willing to maybe have a turnaround time that's slightly more of the order of days versus response on LinkedIn, my first name dot last name at gmail.com. That's as about as straightforward as it gets. I'm happy to answer questions if you have any listeners on the show.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
You're welcome, Chad. It was such a great pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Wherever you're consuming this, if it's YouTube, if it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we appreciate you. Make sure you're subscribed. We have a lot more amazing guests on the way, a lot more great content. We're doing our best to bring you value and have fun while we do it. We really want this to be a career advantage, listening to this show, and we want you to enjoy it. So it means a lot. Make sure you're subscribed for what's to come. And also, if you're up for it, it would mean a lot if you leave us a like, a comment, a rating, a review, whatever platform you're on. That really helps, and it gets us fired up when we see those. So I appreciate you guys. Find us on LinkedIn. I'm Blake Bozarth, my co-host Chad Pyke with a Y. Would love to connect with you there. Have an awesome day. See you next time. Peace.